Something happened inside that arena that nobody in professional basketball was prepared for. Not the coaches, not the officials, not the millions of fans watching from home. A single play lasting less than 3 seconds has now ignited the most explosive, most divisive, and most talked about scandal the WNBA has seen in years. And the terrifying part? The actual hit on the court was only the beginning. What followed in the locker room, on social media, and across national television turned a dangerous foul into a full-blown cultural war. Before this night is over, you are going to understand exactly why the entire sports world is losing its mind, and why the league itself is now sitting in the hot seat with nowhere to hide. The Indiana Fever and the Chicago Sky have built one of the most intense rivalries in the modern WNBA. These two teams do not like each other. The physicality is real, the stakes are personal, and every matchup between them carries an electricity that most regular season games simply cannot manufacture. But nobody, not even the most seasoned analysts covering this league, could have predicted what was about to happen in that first quarter. The arena was loud, the energy was suffocating, and right in the middle of all of it, Sophie Cunningham got her hands on the basketball with an open floor in front of her. Cunningham is not just a role player. She has carved out a specific and critical identity on this Indiana Fever roster as the enforcer, the player who protects her teammates, sets the tone physically, and refuses to be pushed around by anyone. She is respected, she is feared, and she is exactly the kind of player every championship team needs in their corner. So when she grabbed that ball and turned toward the open lane, nobody was particularly alarmed. A fast break layup, routine. She elevated, extended toward the rim, and was completely and utterly defenseless in the air. That is the exact moment Dejonai Carrington made her decision. Trailing just behind her on the play, Carrington closed the gap with deliberate speed. There was no attempt to contest the shot cleanly. There was no reach for the ball. What happened instead was calculated, targeted, and vicious. Carrington loaded up and delivered a thunderous forearm strike directly into Cunningham's head and neck region. A hit so forceful that it completely launched Cunningham out of the air and sent her crashing violently down onto the hardwood floor. The arena went dead silent for a split second before erupting. Cunningham's layup, almost impossibly, still dropped through the net, but nobody cared about the 2 points. Every single person in that building was staring at the floor where Sophie Cunningham had just been slammed down like she weighed nothing. The referees froze. Players on both benches rose to their feet. Cunningham's teammates were already moving toward the scene before the whistle even blew. This was not a basketball play. Everybody in that arena understood it immediately, and the footage would later confirm it beyond any possible doubt. What happened in the next 90 seconds revealed exactly what kind of competitor Sophie Cunningham is. Most players, after taking a hit like that, stay on the floor. They grab whatever body part absorbed the most damage, they signal to the medical staff, and they let the moment work for them. Cunningham did none of that. She was back on her feet almost immediately, and she was furious. She did not look for a trainer. She did not look at the bench. She looked directly at Dejonai Carrington, and she charged. Teammates and officials scrambled from every direction to get between them. The situation was teetering right on the edge of a nationally televised brawl, and everyone on that court knew it. Security, coaches, players from both rosters, all of them converging on the same patch of hardwood, trying to prevent this from boiling completely over. The referees had already made their way to the replay monitors, because at this level of violence, a routine flagrant 1 review simply was not going to cut it.
They watched the footage once, then again, and the tape left absolutely zero room for debate. The officiating crew identified 3 specific elements that sealed the decision immediately: a clear windup before contact, severe impact that sent the opposing player airborne, and reckless, dangerous follow-through with no attempt to pull back. Every single box for a flagrant 2 foul had been checked and double-checked. The call was upgraded on the spot. Dejonai Carrington was ejected from the game. She was escorted off the court, away from Cunningham, away from the cameras, and down the tunnel toward the locker room. The crowd was still buzzing. The game had not even fully resumed yet, and most people watching assumed that the ejection was the end of it, that Carrington would sit in the locker room, cool down, and the night would move forward. That assumption was catastrophically wrong. Minutes after being walked off the court by security, before the game had even finished playing out, Dejonai Carrington pulled out her phone. She was inside the locker room, ejected, required by league policy to remain there until post-game media obligations were fulfilled, and specifically prohibited from using personal electronic devices during that window. She did it anyway. She opened her social media and typed 2 words: white privilege. That post hit the internet like a grenade. Within minutes, it had been screenshotted, shared, and spread across every platform imaginable. The conversation that had been entirely about a dangerous and reckless foul suddenly fractured down the middle. Now it was about race. Now it was about identity. Now it was about everything except the hit that put Sophie Cunningham on the floor. And that, many observers argued, was precisely the point. The strategic nature of the post was not lost on anyone paying attention. Carrington had just committed one of the most flagrant acts of on-court violence the WNBA had seen this season. She had been ejected in real time on a national broadcast. The footage was damning, the replay was damning, and the reaction from the arena had been immediate and unanimous. Posting white privilege from the locker room was not an emotional outburst. It was a calculated attempt to flip the script, to transform from the aggressor into the victim before the final buzzer even sounded. Here is where it gets even more revealing. According to the 2026 WNBA official rulebook, ejected players must immediately retreat to the team's locker room and are expressly prohibited from using personal electronic devices or posting to any platform until all post-game media obligations have been completed. Carrington violated that policy in real time, while the game was still being played, on a post that immediately went viral and inflamed an already explosive situation. And yet, as the hours ticked by after the final whistle, no additional punishment had been announced. No fine, no suspension, nothing. That silence from the league office would become its own story. When the reporters caught up with Sophie Cunningham after the game, they were expecting emotion. They were expecting frustration. Some probably expected tears or anger or a pointed attack on Carrington. What they got instead was something far more powerful: composure, clarity, and an absolute refusal to be baited. Cunningham addressed the foul directly. She said she believed it was intentional. She noted that the hit was completely unnecessary, that it had nothing to do with the flow of the game, and that she had no prior history or ongoing conflict with Carrington. She had never really spoken to her at all. Her read on the situation was simple. Carrington wanted attention, and she picked Sophie Cunningham as the vehicle to get it.
Then came the question about the social media post. The reporters wanted to know how she felt about being called a symbol of white privilege by the player who had just put her on the floor. Cunningham paused, then answered in a way that completely dismantled the narrative in one sentence. She said there was absolutely no reason to even play that card. And then she did something remarkable. She pointed to herself. She reminded everyone watching that she had been ejected the previous season for a similar foul. She served her punishment, she accepted the consequence, and she moved forward. Accountability does not check your skin color before it applies to you. It applies to everyone, or it applies to no one. That answer spread faster than the original post. It landed because it was not a political argument. It was not a rebuttal designed for cable news. It was simply the truth, delivered calmly by a woman who had just been clotheslined on national television and refused to use it as a stage for anything other than honesty. Carrington's attempt to make herself the story had completely backfired, and Sophie Cunningham had not even had to raise her voice.
The sports media universe was already combusting by the time Fox News contributor Joe Concha entered the conversation, but his reaction poured an entire tank of fuel onto a fire that was already consuming everything in its path. Concha was not measured, he was not diplomatic, he was absolutely disgusted, and he made no effort to hide it. He came out publicly and made the case for a full season suspension, not a game suspension, not a fine, not a strongly worded statement from the league offices, a full season suspension. His argument was layered and direct. First, this was not a basketball play and should not be treated with basketball-level punishment. The wind-up, the targeting, the reckless follow-through, these were the mechanics of an assault, not a foul. Second, the social media post from the locker room, while still under league jurisdiction, was a separate and additional violation that compounded the original offense. Third, and most critically, the league had said nothing. No announcement, no timeline, no indication that anyone in the front office understood the gravity of what had just happened on their watch. Concha's position resonated deeply with a fan base that was already frustrated, because the argument was not really about Dejonai Carrington specifically. It was about a pattern, a sense that dangerous behavior on the court was being treated as a minor inconvenience rather than a serious integrity issue, and that players who crossed certain lines faced no meaningful consequences. He argued that the WNBA had a rare opportunity to send an unmistakable message that violence will not be tolerated, that social media policy exists for a reason, and that no player is exempt from accountability simply because they can reframe their actions through a political lens. Whether you agreed with his specific call for a season-long suspension or not, the underlying demand was one that thousands of fans echoed loudly and clearly across every platform. The league needed to act, it needed to act quickly, and the punishment needed to match the severity of what the entire sports world had just watched happen in real time. But the Carrington hit was not the only controversy brewing inside that arena. Tucked within the same game, almost as if the basketball gods were determined to make this night as complicated as possible, a separate and equally telling incident was unfolding around Caitlin Clark. Clark received a technical foul during the contest. The moment that triggered it was, to put it plainly, almost nothing. She had made contact with a referee, the kind of incidental bump that happens dozens of times in any physical basketball game, and the official responded by slapping her with a technical. Clark's reaction in the immediate aftermath said everything. She could not believe it. The look on her face was not anger, it was pure disbelief, because the call felt completely disconnected from anything that had actually happened.
Here is where the situation gets uncomfortable for the league. During that same game, in front of those same officials, Natasha Cloud was caught on camera physically placing her hand on the rib cage of that same referee and pushing her aside. Not nudging, not incidental contact, a visible, deliberate push. The footage is clear. Cloud's hand is on the official's body. The referee's response? Nothing. No call, no technical, no reaction whatsoever. And Cloud was not alone. Paige Buckers was also seen making physical contact with an official during the same game. Same result. No call, no consequence, no acknowledgement. 3 incidents, 3 different players, 3 completely different outcomes. The only player who received a technical foul was Caitlin Clark for what may have been the least physical of the 3 interactions. The internet noticed immediately, and in the already supercharged atmosphere surrounding this game, with Carrington's hit and the white privilege post already dominating the conversation, the Clark technical became another data point in a rapidly building argument about inconsistency, selective enforcement, and whether certain players in this league operate under a different set of expectations than others. Analysts began pointing out that calling a technical on Clark for incidental contact while completely ignoring Cloud physically pushing the same official was not just inconsistent refereeing. It was the kind of inconsistency that destroys fan trust. Because if the rules mean different things depending on who is involved in the play, then they aren't really rules at all. As the night wound down, Indiana secured the victory, 90-86 over the Chicago Sky.
Under normal circumstances, that final score would be the headline. The Fever are a team with real aspirations this season, and a win over a competitive Sky squad would generate genuine conversation about their trajectory and what it means for the standings. But the final score had become completely irrelevant. Nobody was talking about it. The box score, the stats, the highlights, all of it buried beneath an avalanche of outrage, debate, and demand. The fans were not waiting for the league's timeline. They had already rendered their verdict. Social media was flooded with calls for Dejonai Carrington to be suspended for the remainder of the season. Not just fans of Indiana, fans across the league, basketball observers, casual viewers who had seen the clip circulating online and could not believe what they were watching. The consensus was growing louder by the hour. Allowing Carrington to step back onto any WNBA court without a meaningful suspension would be a failure so profound that the league might not be able to walk it back. Because here's the reality that nobody inside the league office can afford to ignore. The WNBA is at a pivotal moment in its history. Viewership numbers are climbing. Stars like Caitlin Clark have brought an entirely new audience to the sport. Sponsorship dollars are flowing in at levels the league has not seen before. The infrastructure for something genuinely significant is being built in real time. And a scandal like this, a violent hit, a racially charged social media post, a policy violation, and inconsistent officiating, all wrapped inside a single nationally televised game, has the potential to unravel that momentum if it is not handled with precision and courage. The fans who are showing up, tuning in, and spending money on this league are not going to accept a front office that shrugs. They are not going to accept silence. They are not going to accept the kind of lukewarm non-statement that treats a forearm to the throat of a professional athlete as a paperwork issue. They want accountability. They want leadership. And right now, both of those things are conspicuously absent. Sophie Cunningham took a forearm to the head and neck in front of a national audience. She got up off the floor, she handled her business on the court, she spoke clearly and honestly to the reporters afterward, and she never once asked for sympathy. She simply told the truth. That kind of composure under pressure is not common. It's the kind of thing that earns genuine respect. Not the manufactured kind that comes from carefully worded statements, but the real kind that comes from watching someone behave with extraordinary dignity in an extraordinarily difficult moment.
Dejonai Carrington made 3 decisions that night. She chose to hit Cunningham, she chose to pull out her phone in violation of league policy, and she chose to post white privilege while a game was still being played around her. Each of those decisions will now follow her. And the 4th decision, the one that actually matters most at this point, belongs entirely to the WNBA. Does the league have the institutional courage to respond to this moment the way it demands to be responded to? Does it understand that the eyes of an enormous and growing audience are watching not just for basketball, but for evidence that the people running this sport take it seriously enough to protect it? The referees did their job. They reviewed the tape, they made the right call and ejected Carrington in the moment. The on-court officials held the line. Now the question is whether the people above them will do the same. This is no longer just about one foul in one game between 2 teams in the middle of a regular season. It became something much larger the moment Carrington walked into that locker room and decided that the right move was to reach for her phone instead of taking responsibility. It became a referendum on the culture of the league, on whether dangerous behavior carries real consequences, and on whether a sport that is finally experiencing genuine mainstream momentum is going to protect that momentum or gamble it away on a pattern of soft accountability. Every single development in this story is still unfolding. The league has not spoken. The suspension, if it comes at all, has not been announced. The conversations happening inside the WNBA offices right now will shape what this league looks like for the rest of this season and beyond, and the sports world is not looking away. Sophie Cunningham stood back up off that floor. The question now is whether the league is capable of doing the same.